If you're currently shopping for an e-bike and you're looking for something that folds, is a step-through, has front suspension, fat tires, a rear rack, well, then stick around. I'm going to talk about the DYU FF500 fat tire electric bike. DYU, is that a play on words from DYI? Honestly, I have no idea, but that would make a lot of sense. Thanks again to Blake for providing all of the riding footage for this video. I'm not quite up for that yet, so I'm going to share with you the specs that are written down on paper, what's on their website, and Blake is going to give you the opposite side of the experience. What does it actually feel like to ride?
I can really feel the suspension Seatpost sucking up the small bumps.
How well do the brakes actually work? Is the suspension fork too soft? Too hard? Is the bike comfortable? Does the suspension seat post actually work? I'm sure you guys all know that I am the one that has to see a bike in person, and if it's not me riding it, it has to be somebody I trust that rides it so we can get a complete picture of whether or not the bike is actually any good. By the end of this video, you're gonna know. This bike is $18.99 retail, but right now when I'm recording the video, it's actually only $12.99.
Wow.
Which is a pretty good deal. Like I said, this is a step-through folding bike. We're starting to see a lot more folding bikes that have the battery integrated into the frame, and this is one of those. Now, you may look at that from two different perspectives on whether or not that's good or bad. I'll leave that up to you. Basically, the thought is, number one, if it's not integrated and it's mounted behind the seat post somewhere or on the rear rack, or maybe it's mounted on the down tube, it doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as sleek. Maybe it doesn't fold as nicely. Maybe it doesn't have as much clearance on the step-through portion of the frame. But if there's ever an issue with the battery and you can't get an exact match for whatever reason, it's easy to replace with something aftermarket. An integrated battery looks a lot nicer. The bike's a lot cleaner. It might fold nicer. Which one of those is more important to you really just matters to you. This is a pretty standard 48 volt, 14 amp hour battery. And although everybody would love more battery capacity, I think that's a good choice when you're going with a folding bike because you want to keep the weight down. Ideally, folding means you want this to be transportable. You want to be able to fold it and lift it into the trunk of your car or put it somewhere. It has front and rear disc brakes. They are mechanical, which is what I would expect for kind of the low end of the price point. The $12.99 they're actually selling it for right now. If it was really going for the retail $18.99, I would love to see them bump that up to some hydraulic brakes. That's just my opinion on where things should fall based on the price of the bike. And we do have a pretty big discrepancy here. $600 off right now. I think for the current price, that's totally fine. Brakes are really easy to upgrade. We've got lots of those at Area 13. And realistically, mechanical brakes work perfectly fine if you have them tuned up, you have them adjusted correctly. They give it a range of 43.5 miles. I mean, you could do that if you're pedaling a fair amount. I personally, with a 14 amp hour battery, would tell people like 20 to 30 miles, but that's just more typical. Obviously, we live in an area where there's more hills, so I kind of lean towards the more conservative side. Could you do 43.5 miles? If you're pedaling a lot, certainly. If you're throttling around and just cruising on this thing, don't expect to get that. Just know that, as always, range varies depending on the terrain, the rider weight. There's so many factors that go into that. One thing that is going to help it a little bit on the range is that this is a 500 watt. That's usually what we see on 20-inch fat tires. In case you're thinking, I really want 750 watts, I personally don't think that's always necessary.
We can go up a little bit harder of a hill here. I'll take her down into mid-range gear. Really climbs up real nice, super easy.
When you put a 500 watt motor in a little tiny 20-inch wheel, typically the way those motors are manufactured are actually for a bigger 26-inch wheel, and normally they don't change the windings and the gearing in the motor to compensate for that smaller tire. They just grab a motor effectively off the shelf that's designed for the bigger wheel, and by downsizing it, you get a lot more torque into it. Blake didn't seem to have any issues with the power. If anything, it sounded like at times it was a little too punchy, so I think this is perfectly fine. Now, one of the reasons it could be a little too punchy or a little too quick to take off is it says on their website they only have 3 riding speeds. You really need like 5 levels of pedal assist to match all the settings, terrain. I've got some displays or some bikes that can be reprogrammed to have like 9 different levels of assist, and that's nice, but I find that most people don't actually need that many. 5 is enough, 3 is not quite enough, 9 is just way too many button clicks to get to like maximum power or minimum power. So I think if they had a couple of steps lower in the pedal assist, that would probably help resolve that particular issue. I've seen this particular display on quite a few bikes over the years, and it does the basics that you need. It's black and white, which I really like displays that are in color because they look cool, but the truth is they don't actually do anything more other than they just look good. A black and white display is actually perfectly fine. In some cases, they can be easier to read in direct sunlight.
And the screen's really nice. It's a nice large text. It's just a quick look situation. You just want to quickly look down, just like out of this corner of your eye almost. You can really see what's going on.
It seems like it folds up pretty nice, fairly compact. You're always going to have a slight compromise when you buy a folding bike that has fat tires. Basically, the bikes always fold in half, so your wheels are right next to each other. So if you've got 2 skinny little 1.9 or 2-inch tires that have to go against each other, then that's one thing. But when you have fat tires, then you got to have a wider frame, you got to have a wider fork. So the overall width of a folded fat tire bike is going to be bigger. My personal preference is a folding fat tire bike. They're more comfortable to ride, they're more useful. I feel like they're an everyday bike that you can just use for everything. If you go with a folding bike that has skinny little tires, it's going to be lighter, it's going to fit into smaller spaces, but you're not going to be able to have as much fun with it. You're not going to be able to take it on light trails, and no folding bike is like a trail bike, single track, mountain bike that I've ever seen. But you can do it to some degree if you need to. And gravel roads, dirt roads, sand, you can do all of that kind of stuff. But back to the DYU. It does have a front suspension fork.
The forks are giving a little bit of a cush feel to it. I haven't gone off any trails or anything yet, but that should be not an issue.
Not a top-of-the-line fork by any means. It's built to a certain price point, but it gets the job done, and it works. And that's all a bike like this really needs. You don't need a fully adjustable air fork of some sort. Honestly, on a little folding bike like this, you just need something that's going to soak up the occasional speed bump or pothole that you didn't intend on hitting. And surprisingly, it sounds like the suspension seat post works really well too.
Yeah, the seat post, really, really nice. There we go, the forks and the suspension seat post really sucking up those bumps right there. Good feels.
I think part of that is the fact that it's got that big cushy seat on there that does actually look pretty good. I do feel like some of these suspension seat posts that go straight up and down tend to be a little sticky. I don't know how this one's going to hold up over, the next year or 2 years or 3, but it sounds like out of the box, it's sufficient and it's quite comfortable. Bike's using standard Shimano parts. It's using the thumb shifter that I've seen and used myself on many bikes. They're inexpensive and they just work. I like the rear rack design. From a distance, it actually does look like it's part of it, but it is a separate bolted on rear rack. Now, Blake mentioned these tires, how they felt pretty decent on the road and off-road.
Tires are nice, 4-inch by 20. They seem to work nicely in the gravel and on the street, so a little bit of everything.
I've seen people run this style of Chow Yang tire for like 3,000-4,000 miles when a comparable, say, Kenda tire or some other brand wears out in like 800 to 1,000 miles. The bike has the standard integrated lights, front and rear. The front light appears to be the style because I've just seen so many lights over the years, that isn't very bright. You're projecting some light in front of you. It's helpful for cars and other vehicles to see you at dusk or even at night, but they're not that great for actually lighting up a road or a trail. If you're really gonna ride at night, I think you'll want something brighter.
It all depends on the size of the motor and whatnot, but usually it'll bark like 40 miles, you know, ish, somewhere in there. Depends on just like a gas tank, you know, how much.
Dual motors too, right?
You can get all sorts of stuff, yeah, so, yeah. I'm just doing a test ride on this one, so. Yeah, we have a shop right across the way there. Yeah, swing by anytime. We're there until 4:30 every day, so, yep. All right, cool.
The recommended height range, they say 5.24 to 6.39 feet. Max weight, they say 300 pounds, which is pretty decent. The bicycle weight is 68 pounds. Probably the suspension fork is adding a few pounds that some other folding bikes in this category aren't gonna have. The max speed is 20 miles an hour. That's pretty normal. If you got a 500 watt motor, 20-inch fat tire, that's about all the faster you're gonna go. I think a lot of people will be perfectly happy buying these and riding it around for years to come. On the flip side, is there anything that is so great that really sets this bike out from the competition and makes it a better bike than everything else at the price point? Honestly, no. It's a good bike. It's a good value. I don't see anything wrong quality-wise with it. It just means DYU has a lot of competition. As always, we are going to give somebody a great deal on the demo bike in the very video. So if you want an extra special deal on the DYU, reach out to us, let us know. We've only got one, and once it's gone, it's gone. I'll also put a link in the description to DYU's website so you can check them out online. I'm Kyle from Area 13. If you love electric bikes, hit that subscribe button. We've got a ton of other videos about e-bikes, about components, about how to upgrade your bike. If you've made it this far, I think you'll like this video right here.
Whoop. Typical me. And then too high of a gear for this stuff. I'm gonna throttle out of this thing. Pedal 3, pedal assist 3. There we go.